I've always thought that the level of engagement is what determines the success and the enjoyment in a lesson as well. Like someone gave me an analogy years ago of like those computer games where the last level was really hard, but just hard enough. And then you keep trying, and then you sort of finally complete the game. And this actually enables me to provide that level of challenge for all of the kids in my class. Actually, it's revolutionized what I could do with these kids because every lesson they're getting something which is really appropriate for what they need.
Welcome to It's Not the End of the World, everyday use cases for AI, where we have conversations with real people about how they're using these new tools that are making waves in society. Today, I'm joined by Dipesh Patel, who is a teacher based in London. He's a secondary school teacher, head of science for his department, and speciality is physics. He studied engineering at university before spending a few years in that industry and then making the transition to teaching 14 years ago, which is where we met. Now, 14 years later, we're catching up. So, Dipesh, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, great. I noticed that in your bio that you sent over to me, you made a point of saying that you read a lot of science fiction and also dystopian fiction. So I feel like you're somewhat primed for this present moment.
Yeah, I think so. It's always been the back burner, these sort of questions, and it's all around us now. I've been watching quite a few podcasts about AI as well as within education, but the AI story is fascinating and how it's going to unfold in the next 5-10 years, etc. It's crazy.
Okay, so were you taken by surprise when ChatGPT came along, or was this something that you were kind of thinking about?
Oh no, I was taken by surprise. I had no idea it was as advanced as it was.
So tell me about that kind of, when did it start pinging on your radar, let's say?
I guess it was when ChatGPT was released, first of all, to be honest with you.
And when it first landed, what was your thoughts? Did you look at this and go, oh shit, this is like something that could be really like helpful in teaching? Or were you like many people that were like, okay, this is a cool novelty, but whatever?
It's the latter. I just thought it was a cool novelty. I never really used it that much when it first came out. I didn't really use it for teaching. I just played around with it as everyone else does, use it as a sort of a web search thing, or just played to understand what it was and just understand the sort of relationship with it and, talking to it as a person, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't really start using it until about a year ago, maybe in education. Yeah, just like for my job. I thought it was not novel as such. I never realized the potential within it. And I was always just too busy doing my day-to-day without spending enough time using it in order to streamline what I actually do. Okay,
interesting. Okay, but then a year ago, things changed.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, he's into it, and he's the guy I sort of have conversations with. He was just showing me some of its functionality and what it can do, and he sort of and that sort of sparked an interest in it a bit more, I guess. We talked about making resources and all this kind of stuff, and we talked about coursework, and these are some of the things we might talk about. But yeah, just developing on those conversations with him was a big moment. Yeah.
All right. So you started seeing the potential for potential use cases. So tell me about those.
Yeah. So as a physics teacher, a lot of my time is spent doing sort of numeracy or formula work. And I would like to create a set of tasks which increase in difficulty, have full working out, and all of that kind of stuff. Previously, I had to write that myself. So I'd go into Google Slides and I'm literally typing up questions, lots of formatting, all of that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to giving students questions, I'd have to make those as well so that the right level at which I want to give to the students. And that would take me previously, half an hour, for example, to write 10 good questions from the lowest ability to the highest ability in the class. But now, so I use Gemini, or I use ChatGPT actually, but I played around with it and said, right, I've got a year 10 class, I'm teaching about kinetic energy. Can you write me a set of 10 questions with increasing ability, etc.? And I played around with it until it made what I wanted. And then, and so what that included, for example, is it has a list of questions which are at the level of challenge I want. They might include conversions or rearranging. It will then have full working out, which is structured. It could also even have hints and sort of tips. It can also link to explanations about why or the concept behind it. And for me to make that myself would take me about an hour. But now I asked ChatGPT to write a prompt so that all I have to do is input the year, the topic, and the formula, and it will make this resource. So now I can do that it's such a time saver, and it's actually better than I would make in the time I had. Obviously, in the time I had, but all of the conceptual understanding and the links, it provides all of that stuff as well.
That's amazing. So you're getting better resources than you would have before, and you're able to create these resources for more classes, I'm imagining.
Yeah. And as I go through my curriculum, I do it with every single class. In addition to that, so if I've started teaching a year 11 class, and there's a really mixed ability, there's SEND needs, etc. as well. And I normally teach the triple classes because I'm the specialist physics teacher. So I teach the IB, I teach year 11 triple and 10 triple, and often it's the highest ability students. And now I've got a really mixed ability class, and I'm trying to scaffold up, which means breaking tasks down. So for students to access, and I get it as a similar thing where I created prompts, one for literacy. So I said, right, could you please make me a literacy task at the beginning? It would have, matched keywords to the definitions. The next section would have a cloze exercise. Then it would have some simple questions. Then it would have some multiple choice questions. Then it would have some short answer questions, and then an extended writing question. And really what I've done is I've just copied and pasted in the specification and some answers, and it creates this massive document for me. And then the students can work out whichever bit of it they need to.
Wow.
Instead of me making that myself.
Okay, so I can see how this would be really helpful for you as a teacher, just to reduce your workload. How are the students responding to this?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I've always thought that the level of engagement is what determines the success and the enjoyment in a lesson as well. Like someone gave me an analogy years ago of like those computer games where the last level was really hard, but just hard enough. And then you keep trying, and then you sort of finally complete the game. And this actually enables me to provide that level of challenge for all of the kids in my class, depending on what their starting point is and where their ending point is. So actually it's revolutionized what I could do with these kids, because every lesson they're getting something which is really appropriate for what they need. And, that's like the lower and middle ability. And then the higher ability, I can give them stretch questions and extended writing tasks. I've got it to, structure reports. I have like a year 8 kid who's 12, 13 years old, who's one of those just really intelligent kids. And I gave them projects on linking quantum mechanics to particle physics and all of these things. And the kid just get on and do them, because I could just get ChatGPT to write it for me.
That is amazing. Honestly, it's so incredible to hear you speak about this, just because this is when ChatGPT first came out for me. Obviously, I was already 5-10 years out of teaching, but the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, this would be amazing for teaching. And perhaps differently to you, because you're a scientist, but I'm an English teacher, and obviously it's very good with language. So I think I saw somewhere someone had it compare the music of Brian Eno to a dolphin, right? And ChatGPT did this amazing job of writing a 3-paragraph, 5-paragraph essay comparing the music of Brian Eno to a dolphin, to a physical dolphin, and it was amazing, right? And as an English teacher, one of the hardest things to get my students to do was to compare and contrast. It's very difficult to get them to compare and contrast 2 poems, or you'd have to get them to compare and contrast an apple and an orange and start from there, and then try and, as you say, scaffold up. So to see this like artificial intelligence do this really complex task that obviously required creativity, I immediately thought, oh wow, there's something in this. And I just want to say from that moment, I was like, I really just want to speak to some teachers about this. And so it's great to actually hear you finally kind of validating that.
Can I just add one thing to that as well? I also got the student, I create literacy tasks, which is sort of scaffolded up, I said, but I want them to read more. But obviously trying to find something or type something where it has like a concept at different levels is quite difficult. So, I can get ChatGPT to write different levels of challenge of literacy. So it could be really complex language or scientific language, or it could be really sort of dumbed down. And I give them all, or different groups, different paragraphs, which is aligned with their reading age. And then the questions align to that as well. And I can, finding that stuff is, impossible.
Totally. I mean, I want to give some context now to the listeners of what my experience was like as a teacher, just to give some context about what we're speaking about here. So first, you're talking a lot about this kind of buzzword, which is differentiation, which when I was a teacher was the holy grail of your lesson. You had to differentiate, which basically meant if you had different levels of learners in the class, different ability students in the class, you needed to try and create a lesson that would be differentiated for each of those different learners. So in English, we would literally break that down into three. You'd have like the low level, the mid level, and the high level. And if you differentiated your lesson for those three broad categories of learners, it was considered outstanding. You'd done the best that you could do, right? But really, when we really think about that, I mean, there's 30 different kids. They all have completely different bespoke needs. And as a teacher, you're so much, just to speak about how overwhelming it is as a teacher, the amount of stuff you have to do. You're often teaching from 8:30 a.m. till 3 p.m. During that time, you have minimal breaks. You're not able to leave the classroom to, let's say, use the restroom. In between lessons, you need to be drinking coffee or eating food. However, if the students have misbehaved, you might be dealing with someone maybe had a fight in the classroom, so you need to then discipline them, have conversations with them. You might need to phone parents. In the meantime, outside of all of that, you're also meant to be marking all of the work that the students have done. I taught 150 kids a week, so 150 different pieces of work that I was meant to be marking every week and trying to find time to do that. You're also trying to plan lessons for all of these different students and write reports on all of these different students that you're informing the parents about how well they're doing. And that's just the stuff off the top of my head that I can think of. So the teacher is unbelievably kind of top heavy amount of work that's on their shoulders. And to then try and plan these outstanding lessons requires just the space to be creative and to be imaginative. And what I would do often was go online and try and find worksheets that other people had prepared that you could then use for your lesson. But often they weren't bespoke enough, they weren't good enough, they weren't quite in the bullseye of what your particular student needed or wanted. So you had to then start, reworking them after spending a lot of time looking online for not the right thing. And then you're just like, sometimes you think, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. So then you start building your own worksheet. And as you said at the beginning, build your own worksheet, and then you have to format it and you have to try and make it look nice. And then you're working on your PowerPoint to try and make that look nice. So as you can kind of hear from hopefully the way I'm speaking, it's a very difficult and overwhelming job. And any way that you can find any help with any one of those tasks is unbelievable. And now to hear you just describe, you can not only differentiate 3 times for the different 3 levels of student, you can differentiate 30 times potentially. You can also properly scaffold and have mark schemes and ways for the students to look at the work and engage with it and understand what they need to do to achieve. And then when the student completes it, because he's so able, you're able to go to ChatGPT real quick and say, hey, this lesson I just did, one of the students has finished and I need to come up with a task. Can you just come up with something for me? And then you can take it and give it to him. I mean, before, when the high ability students in my class, they'd finish in like 10 minutes and I still had another 40 minutes left of lesson. And I'm just trying to deal with other students that need my attention. And I couldn't give them anything to do. I just had to, off the top of my head, okay, just come up with 10 similes to describe the sun. It was inadequate. It was inadequate. It wasn't good enough. And now it's just really heartening to hear that there's technology has come along that can help you with all of that. Does that resonate? Would you?
It really does. It really does. Yeah, it's the exact same shared experiences. There's only so much time, and you try to do everything to a high standard, and it's just not possible. And then it becomes a lifestyle in itself, and it affects the whole industry. Teacher retention in England's really bad right now, and because of the working conditions, etc. So this actually has a lot of potential to make life better for teachers. We can either do the same amount of work in a smaller time, or within the same time have a higher quality output, which is ultimately what we also want for the kids. So yeah, it's a game changer.
That's amazing. Speak for a moment. I remember to the retention element. And
Mm.
obviously, I fall into these statistics. I think I left on the 5th year of teaching, and I believe there's some sort of like really harrowing stat that when I was a teacher, within the first 5 years, like 70% of new teachers would leave. Do you recall what the stats are to teacher retention?
I don't know what they are today. Our main issue is we're not recruiting enough, and sorry, it's not even retention; it's teacher recruitment. Sorry, that's the main issue. It's teacher recruitment. We don't have enough teachers in the first place to teach specialist subjects or just enough subjects. So, you may have a PE teacher teaching music or, geography teacher teaching science or vice versa. It's all that kind of stuff. I'm not actually sure about the retention. That was, that's the wrong word I picked.
But that was true of my day.
It's
Retention was absolutely an issue with newly qualified teachers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it still is. It still is now. I think a lot of teachers also do sort of teach first programs where they come in and do a couple of years and then they go off and do something else. So a lot of teachers quite often. I mean, I've known in my career in the school I'm even working at, teachers just come in for 3 years and then they'll go and do a different career altogether. Whereas,
So the word crisis probably is not too overblown here. And this technology has come along that really is quite well suited to this particular crisis.
Mhm.
And I can even see to the point where you say about, well, now you have non-specialists teaching subjects that they aren't equipped to teach.
Yeah.
I could completely imagine a non-specialist equipped with an AI and understanding how to use a large language model could now at least have a chance to deliver a more appropriate education.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's even an article today in one of the newspapers about all schools having to mandatorily, is that the word, offer triple science or trying to promote triple science rather than combined science and having a specialist teach each of the scientists. Now, when I first started in my school, I was the only physics teacher and now we have two. And it's that kind of thing where we're not recruiting enough. And one of the big disadvantages is having non-specialists teaching the different subjects. So getting a chemist to teach biology, often teachers are relearning things from scratch, or we're sharing best practice. We're trying to collaborate as much as possible, but actually there's not enough time to get someone up to my level of thinking. So using, again, AI can help in a whole manner of ways, from actually just teaching teachers the content themselves, because you can use it to go, oh, please explain this to me, and going through that iteration of it, providing explanations, providing other examples or analogies, and it can do a lot of the thinking for you, which is great. It can also even help in terms of language. So, where sometimes if you have, let's say, international teachers and their sort of command of the English language isn't as good as someone who was native here, it could also help with either correcting their language, improving their slides, and actually providing like simplistic ways to communicate with students as well. Because where I work, for example, we have EAL, the sort of students with English as an additional language. It's really high. I think it's sort of 80% or something like that. So English often isn't the mother tongue of the kids. So actually having better communication is critical, and that can also help some teachers.
I mean, even with that, Dipesh, I can imagine, you're right. I had in my classrooms often a lot of English as an additional language students. And yeah, very difficult to communicate. I mean, even just the idea of differentiating to the point where I could say to ChatGPT or my large language model, I've got a kid from Afghanistan, I've got a kid from Ethiopia, I've got a kid from this country. Can you just give me some phrases in their native tongue that I can put onto the worksheet and explain it? I mean, wild. With that being said, however, that does open the door to me not knowing what the large language model is actually writing and not being able to speak that language. I might not understand that it's wrong. Now, I want to ask you a question about, science and physics. One could argue is its own language as well. And if I'm not well equipped to know whether or not the large language model is right about this thing, E equals MD squared, and I'm like, great, perfect, put that down on the spreadsheet. Are you finding that it's accurate? Are you finding that it hallucinates in this situation? And I'd like to hear your thoughts about that particular element.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to think about. I'm not that fearful right now because what I'm kind of using it for is it's still a support tool. So, for example, in my IB class, if I say, right, here are some questions which just test different links, because I've got some nice new worksheets for you, for example, they may not be exactly what has come up in this year's paper or last year's, but they're still just useful skills, which is what I want to teach the kids, is how to link up lots of different things. So it's within my sort of safety net as such.
Right. And some of it's like not even necessarily about the subject as it is the skills that you're trying to teach them.
It's the skill. Yeah. It's just here's more practice doing more things. And actually the key is if anything, is to make new versions of that and go, right, could you make 10 more questions with different links that I've not seen before? Because that's what I'm actually trying to teach the kids, is how to do that problem solving. So even if it did technically within this sphere make a mistake and go, right, here's another link, that's absolutely fine.
Right. Yes. I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but one of the unique, one of the power prompts is always give me 10 more examples of X. Give me 10 more examples of Y, and I use that in my writing. It sounds like you're using that same prompt, but this time with exercises.
Yeah. Ultimately it's something like that. Yeah. That practice of making more and more is what the final result becomes the prompt.
Explain that. What do you mean? So the workflow is, so you've asked it to do a bunch of work for you, and then at the end of it, you say, write a prompt for me.
Right. I might say, yes, if I've given it a paper and or a few papers and it identifies lots of things, but I have to, the thing is, at this stage, I'm still putting work into prompting it to make sure it does what I want it to do. But what I'm suggesting is, now that I've done the work a few times, I ask it to write the prompt for me for what we have done. So now it's just a bit more automated.
So then you can return to that prompt that you've got saved and just paste it into a new chat, and then you've got it immediately. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to synthesize that just so I can recap it. So essentially, you're saying that you're working with ChatGPT to produce resources, and in that conversation, it requires directing it and nudging it in certain directions, and then you're giving it more information, and perhaps you're giving it information about your students, their ability levels, etc. And as you're going down that long thread, it's taken you a while to get to what you needed. But once you get to what you need, you then say to ChatGPT, okay, now you know what I need. Can you write me a prompt so I can just use that prompt in future? And then it will spit that out. And then you can take that prompt and put it into your notes or into a Word document, or just save it somewhere. So in future, you can just come back and use that prompt. Yeah. And I imagine you could also then take that prompt and give it to other teachers and say, hey, I've discovered this prompt that works really well for X, Y, and Z.
Last year I just shared all of the prompts of everybody else, and they use them to create their resources. I'm still sort of pushing for people to do some more with it, and they will. But yeah, that's completely shareable. And I could theoretically just make 100 worksheets for all of the topics in physics, and just put them online and go, here they're made for you. One for low ability, one for middle, one for high, one for students with ADHD, one for student, with the EAL. I could do it in any language, and I could just literally just type, it's already done. Yeah. And like here's the booklet for you, or here's a booklet with the topic in it, whatever. It takes time to input it though.
Yeah, but Dipesh, if you do that, then you've just given people a fish. But if you teach them to fish, yes, they will have fish for the rest of their lives. So this conversation could go on for another 2 hours, no doubt. But indeed, I'm trying to keep it to a tight 30, Dipesh. We're going to move on to the quick tips section. So, tip number 1 I'm going to ask you for is the advice you would give to somebody who's picking up this technology for the first time.
It's just play around with it, which is always the sort of the first step. Just play around with it. Try to think about what takes you a lot of time and see if it can reduce it for you. Just make some worksheets, make some resources, get it to make 10 multiple choice questions on something, and use that to copy and paste into your slides and see what it can do for you. Just give it a go.
Find a task that doesn't feel like your ego is attached to it being created by you, and see if it can just make that admin heavy task just really quick. Great quick tip. All right. The next tip is your own personal superpower or personal hack that you've found that works well for you?
I'll give you two, but the first is just the use of AFL. So creating questions to test the whole class and make quizzes and things like that. So you can use it to
Can you just define AFL before you continue?
AFL, assessment for learning. So it's ultimately where you need to make a series of questions to check the students are learning. So again, it might be multiple choice questions or something like that. But what you can do is actually just get it to make mini multiple choice question quizzes for you, which you can then put into Google Forms, and then the students can just do that quickly. Whereas that might take you a very long time by yourself.
That's so good. So again, coming back to like my career teacher, the easy part of the lesson, I say the easy part, but the bit that you really got excited about doing was like the main bit of the lesson. That I'm going to teach this kid this subject, and you just want to get right into it. But an outstanding lesson is often, they call it a 5-part lesson, or we could even distill that down to a 3-part lesson. When the kids come in, you have to engage them immediately. Then you teach them the main bulk of the lesson, and then you have to do the plenary, which is the recap of what they just learned. And the starter and the plenary were really, really just, God, right, okay, what do I need to do this? How do I keep this engaging? What do I do? The thought that you could just focus on the main bit of the lesson, and then once you've got the main bit of the lesson done, just take that document and upload it into ChatGPT and ask it to come up with a starter and a plenary for you. Wow, just, again, brilliant.
Yeah. I also, with my kids, because I had just to improve the behavior, I remember one thing I did years ago was advised one of my mentees. So, they kept coming in and mucking around, but I said, like, look downwards at something and get them engaged. And once you have them engaged with something, then you have their attention and you can kind of teach them properly.
The training teacher was finding behavior a problem. So you said you just need to get them to engage in some work.
Engage, yeah. Just by looking down. And he gave them a word search. And I remember seeing this class, and this was actually at the school we taught at together. And it was a year 10, and I still remember it, where all of the kids, they took the word search that he gave them an entry, they went in and they were all just doing the word search. And one of the students who misbehaved a lot, he sort of looked up at one point and he looked around at all of the other kids, just hoping there'd be something. And he literally just went, and went back down to carry on doing his word search, which then allowed them to be focused and get the engagement, and then you can teach them. But, with my kids, this class I have, I give them a short word search on every single lesson now with 5 follow-up questions. So there's 5 questions and then a word search. And it just makes them come in calmly. They enjoy it. I've got their attention. And actually, AI does all that for you.
Does it? So it can make word searches. But what about I'm listening to you talk and thinking, yeah, great, an amazing exercise. But how isn't a word search like a bunch of letters or scrambled?
Yeah. On Gemini as well. It's an image generator.
Wait, so Gemini can image generate a word search?
Yeah, it can do all sorts of things. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also like video ones which show concepts. There's a lot of videos coming through where it's like scientific concepts, and I think they're just done by AI.
What, AI generated like videos from start to finish?
Yeah, short clips showing you just different scientific concepts. But that's like coming through on my social media, so it might not be. I don't know how they made that, but I think I've seen that somewhere.
Can you give me an example of one, and I'll be able to tell you? I'm pretty au fait with the video generator models, so I'll be able to give you a.
I saw like photo. What's it called? Protein synthesis, where it's like separating it, and there's like this thing like walking along a chain, and it's like breaking it apart. Yeah.
I mean, I could imagine it's possible. What people don't necessarily know about these video models, you see them on Instagram often, and in the comments, people will be like, "Oh, you're destroying the planet in order to make this, stupid 10-second clip or whatever."
Yeah.
But the reason that they are making these video models is because a crucial part of developing this intelligence to be useful in the everyday world is for the intelligence to understand physics of the real world. Right?
I see. Right.
So it's crucial that they can understand how light refracts through objects, how the mass of something. So how will a ball bounce, and everything in between? How does water move? How does it splash? And if it can understand that capably, then it's able to really, the next step when what they scientists are hoping for is that AI will have achieved something great when it can come up with novel ideas in science, physics,
Yeah.
and beyond, right? And it's not there yet. And in order to get there, it needs to have a robust understanding of the physical world. And how can you demonstrate that you have a robust understanding of the physical world? Well, you can generate models of the world and then display them to people.
Oh, how interesting, right?
But the side effect of that is all of this like AI slop that we're seeing online, because you know, a consumer-facing product that you can give someone is, you know, these silly AI-generated images.
That's very interesting, actually. That makes sense. So it's
Yeah.
working it all out for the futures for when ChatGPT 8 comes out or something, then it'll be doing high-end science because it's got
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And then they are simulating worlds. You know, is it able to conceptualize the whole world existing beyond just this frame that it's looking at? You know, so it's less about these kind of like fun videos. It's more about world building.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Final question is one surprising or unexpected use case.
It's good for writing comms or like marketing material, for example. So, you know, we have to promote the school and it's like, right, could you please write something about your science department or the IB or what it's like studying IB physics, etc. And I can just put it into the IA and it will make a nice A4 page of lots of interesting information, material, which I've prompted it to do so. Which we can then send to parents or put on our website, all that kind of stuff. And that's actually really useful because that's not my speciality, trying to write, you know, posters or information that goes out to parents, etc. So that's quite a useful thing.
Totally. It's not your job either. You know, it's like, again, it comes back to just how overwhelmed you are. You've got so many different hats that you've got to wear. And, you know, your job is to educate kids, not to be a PR specialist. I really hope we articulated just how useful this is for one of the most kind of valuable people in society. You know, the teacher is the person that deserves, everyone knows that they have a hard job, that they deserve respect, and they shouldn't be, you know, they should be a cherished kind of, again, I'm getting a bit soapboxy here, but I do think teachers should be a cherished kind of member of the workforce. I think they are to some degree, but I don't think it's a job that people want to do. It's definitely not as well paid as it could be. And on top of that, I'll say also that my optimistic hope with AI is that it will be one of the jobs of the future, as we don't want our children to be looked after by AIs or robots. We want them to be looked after by humans, and humans empowered by this technology that can take the workload off.
Yeah, I hope so too, mate. I imagine the role will change because we'll still be there, but the learning itself, AI will sort of take over more of that, and we'll go like, right, let's do some teamwork, let's do some projects. I'll set you up, I'll teach you interpersonal skills, and I'll help you with complexities. But really, in the future, the AI will have such good personalized learning that it's going to be able to do it better than I can, sadly, if not already. Because it's like, you know, like in Star Trek, we see that scene where there's Spock or whatever as a kid in front of all those screens, you know, it'll be like that.
Yeah, totally. And that isn't as dystopian, I don't think, as it could sound. I think my hope is that you just do a little bit of learning on the screens with the AIs, and then the rest of your day is spent learning how to interact with other people.
Yeah. And also this big question is like, what do you learn? You know, if the future's changing so much, it's like knowledge is a very interesting thing to understand. Like, do we still need to know all of it?
Yeah, no, that's a much bigger kind of existential philosophical question, and that we'll have to hold for another time, because I can see that your light is going, mine is really brightening up. So thanks again. Thanks again, Dipesh.
Thank you, Bobby. It's been great to see you, and look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, mate. So, and to our listeners, thank you for joining us too. We'll see you next time, unless it really is the end of the world. Till next time.